Have you ever wondered why some men have every reason to grow up and still won't? Not because they can't, because somewhere deep in their psychology, growing up stopped feeling safe. Staying comfortable started feeling like freedom. This video is about that man. Maybe you know him. Maybe you've loved him. Maybe at 2 a.m. when nobody's watching, you've looked in the mirror and wondered if that man is you. The curiosity gap. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung named this archetype over a century ago the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. A man who possesses the body of an adult, but the emotional coping system of a child. Jung didn't describe him as lazy. He described him as terrified. Terrified of committing, terrified of closing doors. Terrified that if he finally steps into real life and gives it everything, he might find out he isn't as exceptional as he always believed. So he protects the belief by never fully testing it. The dream stays perfect. The potential stays intact. And another year quietly disappears. You see it in the man who has talked about starting a business for 5 years but never launches. The man who calls every relationship not the right time. The man who says he wants a better life but keeps choosing the habits that protect him from ever being tested. That is not a discipline problem. It is a deep fear problem wearing the costume of a lifestyle. Phase 1. The origin of potential. The fear usually has a specific origin. Marie-Louise von Franz, who worked closely with Jung, identified a consistent pattern across the men who fit this archetype. Many were genuinely gifted children, smart, praised constantly, told they were special, different, destined for greatness. That praise became the entire identity, not something they did, something they were. And when adulthood arrived with its ordinary demands, its rejections, its slow, unglamorous process of building anything real, it felt like a threat to the only self they'd ever been allowed to be. So the mind found a solution. Stay in potential. As long as you haven't truly started, you can still believe you would have been the best. An untested dream cannot fail. A man who never commits can never be proven ordinary. Phase 2. The provisional prison. Jung called this the provisional life. Everything is temporary. This job is just for now. This city is temporary. This relationship is temporary. Because the moment you commit, the fantasy closes. The door shuts. You have to become a real person instead of a possibility. The provisional life feels like freedom. It is actually a very elegant prison built entirely from the fear of finding out the truth about yourself. Now, the behavior. Because the eternal boy doesn't always look like what people expect. He doesn't always live in his mother's basement. Sometimes he has a job, a car, a relationship, even children. What identifies him isn't his circumstances. It's what happens the moment life asks something uncomfortable of him. Phase 3. The 3 behavioral weapons responsibility shows up, and he performs helplessness. I forgot. I didn't know. You're better at this than me. Someone else takes over. He stays comfortable. The people around him slowly become his managers. His partner becomes the adult in the room. His parents keep rescuing, his friends keep covering, and he gets to remain exactly where he is. If you act incapable long enough, the world eventually stops expecting anything from you. Criticism arrives, and he makes you survive his reaction to it. You say, "You hurt me," and within 60 seconds, you are comforting the person who hurt you. His ego turns your pain into a referendum on his character. That is not communication. That is emotional hostage-taking. And the exhausting part is that you leave the conversation feeling like you did something wrong. Intimacy deepens, and he disappears. Not always physically, he goes cold, he finds flaws, he creates distance. Because real intimacy requires you to be seen fully without the protection of charm or potential. And that exposure is the thing he has been running from his entire adult life. Phase 4, the dopamine engine. Underneath all 3 patterns is the same engine. Distraction has become emotional anesthesia. Gaming, scrolling, porn, fantasy, endless planning, anything that gives him the feeling of movement without the risk of actually moving. In the game, he levels up. In reality, he stays still. The brain stops telling the difference. And slowly, real life, with its delays, its rejections, its unglamorous middle sections, starts to feel unbearable by comparison. This wound is often accelerated by two completely different childhoods that arrive at the same result. The overprotected man was never allowed to struggle. Someone solved everything, removed every obstacle, made life soft around every edge. He never built the psychological muscle that only resistance can build, because resistance was always removed before it could do its work. The emotionally neglected man had the opposite experience. Nobody taught him to process feelings, ask for help, or sit with shame without running. So he learned to hide behind avoidance, humor, or an identity built entirely around being the one who doesn't need anything from anyone. Different childhoods. Same adult result, a man who does not know how to meet discomfort without escaping it. The strategic playbook. But here is the part that separates an honest diagnosis from a comfortable excuse. Pain explains how you got here. It does not give you permission to make it everyone else's problem. At some point, explanation stops being honest and starts being a hiding place. The man-child is not healed by shame. Calling him useless will not mature him. Mocking him will not build character. Neither will enabling him. The only thing that works is responsibility meeting compassion. Not cruelty, not rescue, but the quiet insistence that he carry what belongs to him. For the man watching this who recognizes himself, do not let this become another video you consume and forget. Do not say, "I'm terrible." Say, "I have work to do." That is where maturity begins. Not in self-hatred, in honest, specific ownership. The path is not complicated, it is only uncomfortable. Kill the cheap dopamine sources long enough to let the discomfort of reality return. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the gap between who you are and who you could be, and the man-child fills that gap with distraction instead of building. Pick up a burden and carry it privately, not a dramatic life overhaul. One thing, done consistently with no audience, clean the room, pay the bill, show up on time. Do the boring thing with full excellence. Small acts of private discipline build the psychological architecture that no amount of consumed content ever will. Then go toward failure on purpose. Send the work before it's perfect. Say the difficult thing, ask for feedback, be rejected and survive it. Every time you step into real life and come back standing, the boy inside gets smaller and the man grows larger. There is no other way. That is the only process that works. Conclusion: Jung left a warning that deserves to close this. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. The man who keeps avoiding his own life doesn't only pay for it himself, he passes the cost forward into his relationships, his children, his legacy. The man-child becomes a man the moment he stops asking who will take care of this for me and starts asking what part of this is mine to carry. If this landed harder than expected, drop one word in the comments. Ownership. Not for me, for yourself.